Well, hello. It's raining today, so I thought I'd try and introduce an idea of a discussion topic. Just recently I was reviewing and flying this Tomahawk wing from Durafly, and I thought to myself, where are all the people flying planes gone? Now, I'm a great fan of multicopters and pretty much all things that fly, but I couldn't fly multicopters without occasionally flying a plane, and if I just flew planes then I'd miss multicopters. I want to fly everything. But it seems to me that lately there's been a decline of people flying planes. Either that or basically quads, and especially the sort of racing style quads, have become so popular they've just blitzed everything. So perhaps planes have stayed as they were, but loads of new people coming to the hobby are just like quad mad essentially, and perhaps wouldn't ever think of a plane. And of course FPV originated from planes. Back in when people were starting to strap cameras to things, there just wasn't anything else you could fly. Generally speaking, a massive plane with some sort of petrol type engine and big cameras and nothing else would carry them. It's only the fact that everything shrunk down brilliantly enough, and we've got this great technology with these gyros and fast tiny chips to run everything on a tiny flight controller, that we can actually fly quads and stuff. So I wanted to pose the question, why? Where are the planes gone? And specifically, do you guys that watch videos like mine and other people, do you fly planes? If you've come into the hobby looking at sort of quad race videos or freestyle videos and that's what you got into, have you ever thought about it? And is there something stopping you from actually trying it? So I thought I'd sort of take a few points and maybe consider pros and cons against like quads versus planes. Perhaps if people thinking they don't like it because of a certain thing, there are things you can get around, there are workaround situations for it, or possible thoughts that people haven't considered that might stop them flying a plane and think, oh, maybe I'll give it a try. So I think the main reason, and potentially the reason I don't fly as many planes as I want to, is the convenience factor. Now, even flying a 5-inch quad like this, which is relatively loud and relatively fast, you only need a tiny space to fly in. And as soon as you go to your micros, your sort of 2-inch or your tiny whoops, obviously you can fly in a house, not a problem. You haven't really got the opportunity on planes so much. You generally need a sort of largest open area. I mean, there are ways around it. This is my Wing 2, which is a gorgeous little tiny wing which flies really nicely, but there's a big caveat to this. It needs to be fairly windless. Whereas your quad doesn't care about the wind. It's effectively got the aerodynamic abilities of a brick. It's like, whatever, get the wind out of my way, it just flies through it, it's super smooth. You put a tiny wing like this in the same situation and it will blow all over the place. On the flip side, if you choose a plane that could fly in, more difficult conditions, so this is perhaps my favourite all-round flying plane at the moment. This is the Mini Talon. Notice the way it says it's mini, but it's this big. So again, this is convenience factor. These things, you can't just pop it in a backpack and go. I mean, the wings come off this and stuff, but it's, it's tricky to store in a house, and transporting them takes more effort. But you've got things in between. I was really impressed by the Zode Dart, and I think Zode do a whole series of these where basically, aside from being small, the wings and things just pop off. So there's no building as such. Of course it's small again, so conditions need to be right. But as long as there's not a gale blowing and you've got a reasonable amount of space to fly in, you can put something in the air generally and have a bit of a fun time with it. So then I thought maybe the complexity of building stuff is putting people off. The way you used to do wings generally was having to cut holes everywhere to install your equipment and trying to get your centre of gravity absolutely balanced before you actually cut those holes to put everything in right. But things like the Tomahawk are sort of more modern design. Even in wings you generally get this central section where you can basically stuff all your gear in and have an easier time. But certainly I know for quad people the idea of a servo, an actual mechanical part, is quite a frightening thing. Although you've literally got 2 servos and a motor, in terms of the electronics it's so much more simple than a flight controller, because there isn't one, it's just direct input to move the surfaces around or move the motor. So is it learning to fly? Now, I always thought that these were pretty easy to fly. You can get the hang of it just sort of hovering around, and as soon as you go FPV, you're okay. I've been proven wrong, having met a few people that really struggled with it and had to sort of go back to the sim and do it. So I don't think it's all easy one side or the other. You've got a certain advantage with planes in the fact that a quad is fighting gravity, it wants to crash, whereas your plane is basically using the air just to carry on. So if you've got the right sort of plane, it will just fly along without you doing anything. In terms of the easiest sort of planes to fly, it's the one with this type of dihedral. That will basically help the plane come back to level. So whenever you roll it, it will pretty much want to come back to here. So as long as you've got your centre of gravity right and you let go of the sticks, it should just sort of glide along like that. I mean, the downside to these sort of things is this nice foam nose. You come down hard on that one, it won't look like this anymore. It'll crumple to a mess. However, if I come back to my Falcon Wing again, perhaps my most, I think pretty much the most flown aircraft I've got, and probably the most crashed one as well. I mean, you can tell it's been well worn. I mean, I'm not suggesting it's been, but if I show you the back, you can see things such as this yellow stuff is the remnants of Gorilla Glue. That entire wing broke and flew off. It actually flew up over and into a tennis court, and I had to climb the fence to get it. And this whole nose is mostly glue, and these are bits of patch up all over the place. So I suppose one good thing that planes may have over quads is you crash them, and it's not a case of, you know, replace an arm or replace a frame. It's kind of just get the glue out and shove it back together again, and they really don't mind. They might look messy from the outside, but as soon as they're in the air, you don't notice it, you don't care, just get on with it. And again, the Tomahawk, kind of a slightly more modern trend. It's not universal, but having something more armoured in the nose or the leading edges is more common these days, to stop basically getting it dinged up as you come into land or crash or hit trees, whatever. So I think another thing that may put people off is the look of the footage. Because these are effectively flying bricks, they don't react to the air coming at them pretty much, they just fly through it. And so the footage you get from these is super smooth, and you know, people whine about the tiniest little ripple. It's like, oh man, it's got gel all over the place, this is useless. As soon as you get to planes where you're riding the wind, obviously any turbulence in the air becomes something you rock about with. So if you saw the video from this one, you saw, oh, it was all over the place. That's because there was some wind above that. Conversely, if you look at the footage where I was filming with the Zode Dart, it was a lot smoother because there wasn't as much wind about. And this is essentially where size and weight overrides wind a bit. So the stuff from this 1 metre wing is pretty good, and the stuff from the Mini Talon, and this takes a 5200 4S, so it's much heavier, gets much better footage. But that said, there's a difference between your footage as you fly with it and what you might, you know, show other people on YouTube. I think the analogy is a little bit like quad racing. If you ever watched FPV live footage from quad racing, I find it really hard to watch. They're taking incredible lines and it's incredible skill, but it's not very flowy. If you were doing something to show somebody, you'd want to go sort of around and gentle and do stuff, as opposed to stuff they do. However, in the goggles, concentrating, it makes perfect sense to them. They're getting their lines and they're hitting them right. And that's kind of how flying planes is. Even in this little thing, which wobbles around, if there's, you know, if someone breathes, it catches a thermal. Through the FPV goggles, you're concentrating, it's feeling great. You feel in control, it's reacting to the sticks. Yeah, it bounces around, but you really don't notice it until you come back and watch that DVR footage. So it's kind of like, yeah, it looks a bit crap when you show it back to people, which you can overcome with, you know, size and weight. But being in the moment and being in FPV is fantastic. It's just as good as a quad, if not better, because I can fly this on a tiny 2S battery for about 5 minutes. This was going to go for 15-20 minutes on a 1.3 amp 3S. And on this guy, I've never got into the situation where I've had to land before. After 40 something minutes, my battery would still go, but I was like, well, I'm a bit bored now. I've kind of seen everything and I've flown about 30 kilometres all around. That's not out and back, that's cumulative distance. And so I generally bring it down and land again. So it doesn't have to be a quad in terms of stamina. But I'll tell you where planes have really lagged behind. Now, I hold up the Coppice One here because this is an example of a quad that was literally ready to fly. I took it out, it's a nice little zippy bag, it had the props on, it had a receiver in, obviously I did a GoPro. Literally all I had to do was bind it and I could fly it. Okay, yeah, I connected up to Betaflight to do the modes and stuff, but it was ready to go. Now, something like the Tomahawk was billed as like an almost ready to fly plane. You still had to glue bits here and here. You had to connect ball joints, had to glue the bottom bits in, and despite having, you know, inserts to put gear and stuff, it literally just had a couple of servo cables there. So I had to add the receiver, I had to have a VTX, antenna, my FPV camera, had to add all this stuff. Where are the ready to fly FPV planes? And the Zode Dart nearly got it right. Again, you can take everything off easily. It has in it a flight stabilizer, which was supposed to work on PPM but didn't. I mean, if these had an S-bus going to it, it would be super duper ideal. But again, I still had to add my own camera and my VTX and my antenna, and I had to split off a cable from here to run the power. So I'm thinking, if you have the level of ready to fly or bind and fly planes, and I'm not talking about, you know, tiny little ones or toy ones, actual planes that people would want to FPV. I mean, they're thinking FPV wing racing is going to be big, but I really don't see this great big push of like, here are a whole bunch of ready to fly wings. You can just, we'll deliver it to you. It comes in one piece. You can buy it up to your radio and go. If those were there, do you think more people would do it? Now, I've kind of rambled on, and I really didn't have much of a direction to start with, other than sort of planes and quads and why people aren't doing both. And I've got a fear I've kind of come across as like, I represent the plane flyers of the world. Fly more planes. That's not the idea. I'm genuinely interested to know if people are still flying them, or if they've got into the hobby through quads, why aren't they flying them? Why aren't they considering them? And would any of the things I've talked about change their mind or help and stuff? And I'm not doing any market research or trying to, you know, get your answers for data mining. I'm just interested because I really enjoy flying them. And again, like anything else, flying planes with a few friends, like flying quads with a few friends, is fantastic fun. Although with planes, it's much easier to get chase footage because they don't look like little tiny dots in the sky. You can get hold of them and you can cruise around, and it's really cool, and you kind of feel like you could be in Top Gun. It's the closest I'm going to get anyway. So there you go. What do you think? Should you be flying planes? Are you flying planes? Why aren't you flying planes? Etc. Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely interested. Anyway, I will catch you in another video when hopefully it'll be dry and I'll be able to fly stuff. Catch you later. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.